Welcome, Buddy Book Club. I'm Dylan here with my bitchy flibberty gibbet, Keith. What's up, buddy?
Thank you. That's one of the meanest things I've ever heard you say to me.
I had a laugh when I read it. I said, you know what? This checks out. Here at the Buddy Book Club, we're breaking down some bestsellers, and this week we'll be discussing Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. If you'd like to recommend a book for us to read, or reach out to us about any past episodes, you can visit our website, buddybookclub.com, or slide into our DMs on Twitter or Instagram, Buddy Book Club Podcast. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, so please download and subscribe. Keith, this was a recommendation from you, I think. Did someone push us in this direction, or did you just say, you know what, I want to learn some shit?
It was on the, I think, top 100 books, and I saw it was a little short one, and I was taught by the prestigious grandson Mr. Vonnegut in high school.
You were? Sex ed? What was the class?
English.
Oh. So the subjects in this book, Slaughterhouse-Five, are quite serious. You know, we're talking about war, death, alien abductions. I think we're qualified to discuss 1 out of 3, maybe. So for all the listeners out there, I apologize in advance. You know, if you're coming here for some sort of great courses or something like that, I apologize. Or if there's someone in high school who's like, I'm not going to read the book, instead I'm going to listen to these guys. Big mistake. Big mistake.
Maybe a little original.
Yeah, but don't get expelled on our behalf.
I can give them a quick...
You have a book report?
Book report ready to go for
Love
them.
that, yeah. Don't do what I did and read the Cliff Notes. Go and get the actual book. But Keith, I would love your book report, so please jump in with that.
Slaughterhouse-Five is a semi-autobiographical, historical nonfiction, historical fiction, science fiction, metafiction, satirical anti-war book. Follows the story of Billy Pilgrim from early age to his death, so it goes. It's told in a nonlinear time, jumpy manner. It's like the movie Tenet, in that they both have constant time changes, and I'll pretend I completely understand both of them for the fear of being called an idiot. It's a book that makes you question everything, your beliefs in war, the innocence of youth, and whether optometry is a scam or not. You won't, however, have any questions about aliens, because they're 100% real. It's a short read that comes to an abrupt end, just like this book report, so it goes.
Yeah, was the last so it goes for your literary critique career? Because... yikes. We're giving you a C+.
Yeah, I didn't think that was very good, but that's okay. I didn't really understand the book, so...
I like the intro because it's so true. We're all over the place with this one. I tried to look up what the book was about afterwards, and a lot of the things that you said in there were in there. Metafiction, this, that, and the other thing. I don't know what any of that stuff means, and I clicked on that, and I read what that meant, and I didn't know what that means. It's like, you can only keep digging into a wormhole that you still don't understand. So with that, let's get into some stock up, stock down. Keith, stock up, what do you got?
Negative outlook, stock up.
Oh.
I think it is a bit strange that this is a high school book. Kind of drills into a few things about life that are somewhat negative. I would say, one, people with authority are typically morally corrupt and don't really care about the innocent, the poor, or the young. That's very well established, it seems. Any person he comes across that hasn't fought in the war or is of some sort of higher standing. I mean, this is every war book we've read, really, but they just don't really care about people that are dying over there. They're just more like, you know, it is what it is. It's worth it.
Yeah.
2, there's no point really arguing with people because everyone's set in their ways, which in high school, I feel like you're like, I'm going to go out and change things. But this book is just like, there's no point in even like caring about anything. Everyone's going to do whatever the fuck they want. And then nihilism, fatalism, and a good sense of humor are the way to go. Those are the 3 things you need in life. It doesn't seem like having any sort of, this is my life plan and this is the journey. It's just like, have a good sense of humor about things. Let things kind of fall off your back like a duck. Then you'll be good. I read this in high school. I'd just be like, what's the point? So I don't know how this is a high school book, or I just read it completely wrong and I'm super negative. But for all those reasons, I like the book.
I think it's just like anything else, you know, like where and when you read something is how you, what you take out of it is attributed to that. But my first stock up is associated with yours. It's inevitability stock up, because a lot of, at least with the Trafalgarians, they say all the moments in the past, present, and future have always existed and always will exist. It doesn't matter really what you do. It's all meant to happen exactly like this, so don't sweat it. And there are positives and negatives with that way of thinking. I mean, the positives are pretty obvious in that what's the point of putting too much emphasis on anything, because it's already written. There's no free will. The idea of free will just like doesn't exist to the aliens. And, you know, you question whether free will even exists to humans. But at the same time, it's a bit sad knowing that if that is the case, then what's the point of doing anything at all?
What does it all mean, Basil, is what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
You just said a long-winded version of that.
Exactly. That should be your book report. Do you believe in that? Do you have believe in any sort of predestination or...
I think that there are certain things that are going to hold everyone back. to a certain extent. But, when I go to the restaurant, I can choose between cheeseburger and spaghetti, So, like, that's really all that matters in life at this point. So,
what restaurant are you going to that has both cheeseburgers and spaghetti on the menu?
My restaurant in my own brain, kid.
A fascinating restaurant. They even said at one point he was talking about he's writing an anti-war book, and then one of the guys he was talking to, this might have been like at a party or something, was like, "Oh, you might as well write an anti-glacier book because it's inevitable." Like,
well, that didn't make sense because glaciers are melting. So I was like, "Wait, what?"
Ooh, I think this is pre ozone, the ozone layer. It's pre that.
Yeah.
Wow, two Austin Powers references, and we're barely even into it.
Nicely done.
What else do you have for stock up?
Stock up, under promise, over deliver.
Always.
I remember reading this in my Management 101 book in college to bring it back to high school and college. But I really like the saying. It's, I think it was written by some dude, or at least the book I read, it was a car dealership. They'd bring cars in to get them repaired, and he'd say, always give them like a higher price and then over deliver and give them a cheaper result. Because everyone leaves happy after that. If you think you're going to pay way more and you all of a sudden pay way less and they give you more out of it.
And you think they're being like honest with you.
Exactly. It's like, oh, these dudes could have continued to rip me off, and instead they went the extra mile and, made it less money. Unfortunately, this book doesn't really abide by that. When he talked about the Dresden bombings, it's 2 days, and I kind of pictured the Khaleesi dragons coming through and firebombing and killing tons and tons of people. Fire raining from the sky. We have ash that's just raining. Everything's black and red. You can't even see. 135,000 people died.
I think he said 125, but yeah, whatever.
Okay, either way, which is more than the atomic bomb deaths, which is pointed out as well. So I'm thinking, this is insane. And then I get to the Wikipedia page. Turns out that's a lie. It's only 25,000, and it went from 25,000 is not something to. That's a lot of people in 2 days. That's an insane amount, honestly. But it went from me being like, this is the worst thing I've ever, can't believe we don't learn about this, to like, 25,000. Like, who cares about, like, that's nothing. That's like, like George Costanza when he finds out that the Andrea Doria boat crash only killed like a small number of people. And he's like, that's it? Like, what? That's a normal cruise. That was me, my mindset. It went from like dragons blowing up the city to like nothing that really that bad. I don't know why, but the under promise, over deliver didn't really come through there. You needed to do that.
It's funny that you mentioned that because, and I'm glad you went next level on the research, which we appreciate, and I'm sure our listeners do as well, because I had just been to the World War II Museum down there in Nolens, which was fascinating, amazing place. If anyone goes down to New Orleans, stay away from the debauchery, at least for a bit, and go check out the World War II Museum. But I don't remember it being that crazy. Like, it was in there, but it wasn't like, oh, wow. Like, it was like 125,000. Like, that's a lot of people. And for me, I'm somewhat gullible in that if someone says something, especially someone I believe to be smarter than me, I'm going to believe that, and I'm going to then tell everybody that. So when he said 125,000 people died in Dresden, I was like, holy shit. Turns out that number not only was wrong, but it came from a Holocaust denier, which tough look. The real number was closer to 25,000. But when this was brought to Vonnegut's attention, he pretty much said, so what? Does it matter? Which is a really good comeback, because now you're the asshole. Because you're saying like those 25,000 people doesn't matter. But, an extra 100,000 people, that kind of matters. But I guess in a war where 30, 40 million people died.
Well, I also wouldn't think it would matter if you didn't compare it to other ones. Because once you start comparing it, then it does matter.
Yeah.
If you just said 10 people dying in this would have been unacceptable, it doesn't matter. But if he was like, look at how many people died in this one versus this one. Like, we should have been talked about more. It's like, well, now you're doing that, so it does matter.
Granted, I think and here we go, we'll start this bullshit all over again, but I do think that the Tokyo bombings, which was the same kind of thing, just like fire bombings of Tokyo, and since Tokyo is all built of all wood and paper, I think that killed more than one of the A-bombs. But who knows? That could be a lie as well. Who knows? It's all a lie. It was pretty wild though that this whole thing was kept secret from Americans for a while. Like,
well, it wasn't necessarily painting us in the best light.
Yeah, I think it was more of a push, from what I understand, of like the British, especially because like they had dealt with their own bombing for so long that they were like, all right, let's just kick the shit out of the Germans. But there's there's no
more revenge.
It's all like, this whole book is like, what's the point? None of it's justified. It's all just, it'll end the war sooner. It's like, okay, kill more people, that'll end the war sooner, whatever. Who knows? Pretty fucked up. I love World War II stuff anyways, and I didn't even know this book was a World War II book until I started reading it, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'm going to be really into this. And I liked it, but it was tough in the sense of it was the opposite of the glorification. And I'm not even saying that the other stuff I watch, like Band of Brothers or whatnot, is like glorifying war, or like Das Boot, like one of my favorite movies, is like definitely not glorifying war. But it took out a lot of the like brotherhood camaraderie stuff, you know, that you love when you watch those things, you know, like people just pitted against a giant war mechanism, but it's just you and the guy that's in the foxhole next to you, because all of the guys that Billy Pilgrim deals with, for the most part, just hate him. But he's so sympathetic because he'd be doing what I'd be doing. Like, if I was in the Battle of the Bulge, I'd be in a ditch being like, just leave me. Don't worry about it. Like, I'm good here. Like, let me freeze to death. But he's pretty pathetic in this throughout. A totally novel look at war from my experience. Like, not obviously experience in war, but experience with media and whatnot.
Because usually in an anti-war book, they won't talk about how young people are. It's like, oh, these are kids, you know, that are fighting for us. And then two, there's usually, even if the person's anti-war, the protagonist is like a good dude. He's the hero. He's, you know, even though he doesn't agree with war, he's still like that one where the guy's Spider-Man dude is like saving people, but he won't like shoot a gun, but he's just like saving lives.
Oh, Hacksaw Ridge.
He is doing his duty. It's still made out to be what a great dude, what a like hero of the war, and you're like, war is not that bad, you know, after seeing it. So,
yeah, when it's all just sounds terrible.
Yeah.
You come out of a friggin' meat locker and you all of a sudden there's just a city that just melted around you. It's got to be wild. Yeah. Like, just such a shock. My next stock up is being a POW, prisoner of war. Obviously, being a POW is terrible. All right, I do understand that. I don't want to get an email from somebody being like, I was a POW, you don't even understand Vietnam, you don't even understand how terrible it was. I believe you. Trust me. 1,000%. But these limey Brits were living like kings, and I needed to say it. All the food, coffee, milk, butter, tobacco that they had saved, when they were going over the numbers, I was like, wait, what? They have how many tons of coffee? How many tons of tobacco? Like, how is that even possible? And they were saying, oh, they stored it in an old area of their barracks and lined it with tin cans to rat-proof it. I was like, I'm doing the math. It was like 10 tons of food. How many cans would it take for you to line something that could fit that much stuff? And then on top of it, these guys are just getting jacked out of their gourds. They're like Cameron Poe in Con Air. They're just saying they're doing chin-ups and push-ups all the time. These guys are jacked, living like kings. Seemed like a pretty sweet situation for being a prisoner of war, considering how it went for so many other folks. What did you think about that?
They're like, these Americans are unruly. It's like the Americans are just fighting this like this huge front. They just like got into like one of like the worst battles of the war. They roll into this camp. They meet these British POWs who've been there for like 4 years and like well fed, getting some nice exercise. It's like, you weren't even in the war. Like, what are you talking? Like, you can't taste shit. Like, you should be handing out the food, just thanking them for even being there. Don't give me this shit of like unruly. Oh, these Americans don't know how to like act with class. Like, shut the fuck up. Get your singing out of here. I don't want to hear any cheery thing. I want to only hear where your food is, and I want you to say, what else do you need? That's it. You know what I mean? I didn't care for it at all.
I mean, they just came from the front lines of the Battle of the Bulge, which for the Allies, you know, outside of shit that went down in Russia, was probably like the worst military conditions in Europe at that time. So, yeah, give these guys a break, honestly. Like, people's feet freezing off and shit like that.
Can you imagine being someone coming in and like started singing cheerfully? How are you supposed to react to that?
You're exhausted and they're like, all right, now we're going to do Cinderella. Be like, oh my God, give me a break. But I did think it was interesting, too, that there's not a lot of movies about U.S. POWs held by Germans. The Great Escape comes to mind. That's
Bruce Willis?
Tears of the Sun? What movie is that?
Heart's War.
Oh, Heart's War. No, I haven't seen that. Was it good?
It's exactly what you're describing. It's a story within a story, but it's definitely worth watching.
Okay. Because, yeah, I feel like we have a ton of, you know, media around being a Japanese POW or like a Viet Cong POW, but not a lot with the German side. And I think it's probably because the Germans, which is just crazy, were like nicer to Americans and British POWs than any of the Slavic people or obviously the rest of the folks who they just decided to straight up kill or work to death. But Hearts War, okay, I'll check that out. Did you have any other stock ups?
One last one, drugs in the 70s, stock up. I mean, obviously, this isn't too shocking of a stock up. But,
we're reading Slaughterhouse-Five and not watching Platoon, right?
Well, I'm referencing just a specific quote in the book. This is my boy, Kilgore Trout. Everyone's asking about him being an author. And the quote is, adulation he was receiving affected him like marijuana. Happy, loud, and impudent. Impudent? What's that word? I-M-P-U-D intent?
Impudent?
Impudent. Okay, I misspelled that. But that means not showing due respect to other people. So just kind of being like, whatever, not what I would describe marijuana would be. That's like when old Keithy drinks too many Zimas. That's me. Loud, happy, and impotent.
Not impotent. Jesus.
Well, that also happens, but anyways. But that's not what's happening when your boys takes too much CBD. I don't know what type of marijuana was going on back in the day, but good for them.
What is it for you? What do you like?
Well, I'm not gonna say I've ever done it, but if I had, I would be passed out right away. It doesn't do anything for me.
Okay.
It puts me to sleep.
That's fine. Yeah, there you go.
But I have to imagine that an anti-war writer has dabbled in his share of devil's lettuce. So I don't think this is just like him throwing out something. So I don't know. I think the marijuana back in the day was like just awesome, maybe?
No, it was terrible, supposedly.
It was terrible because it made you happy, free, and loud. But now people just want to like get knocked out, apparently. I don't know what's going on.
Well, Kilgore Trout is like his alter ego in the book. It's supposed to be like Kurt Vonnegut's alter ego.
Wow, that is not something I would know.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, I think that's why he's joking. He jokes around saying he's like the worst writer ever and stuff like that. But it's supposed to be a version of him kind of thing. It's all satirical, but...
Well, that was my favorite character, so...
Yeah, well, there you go. Oh, interesting. You like Kilgore the best. I mean, he was out there. I also loved when everyone's like trying to like, oh, Billy, you okay? And he's like, oh, he just experienced a time warp or whatever. And everyone's like, get the hell out of here. I was like, no, that's exactly what happened. Like, this guy's been through time. What's going on here? A couple quick stock ups for me. I had to give a shout out to Cape Cod. My boy Vonnegut lived there for many years. He lived in Barnstable, which ain't that far from me, so that's pretty cool. And the movie Interstellar, I had to give a shout out to that because I kind of took the idea of the Tralfamadorians, and I'm going to mess that up every time, but there it is, that what they're saying about time is kind of like the end of Interstellar, right? When it's like, it's all in a bookcase, like the whole timeline is kind of there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that was like the fourth dimension, right? So I think I kind of understood the fourth dimension a little more. Interstellar's another one. Like that throws me through a little bit of loop. Dang this guy for winning another Oscar, because that's just going to make him make more of these movies. I thoroughly enjoy them. Don't get me wrong.
I already quoted Tenet too. So
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Here. And he's always doing stuff with time. Memento, that.
Yeah, every movie pretty much.
Yeah, except for The Dark Knight or that trilogy.
Oh yeah. Well, there is the third one where he recovers from back surgery, gets out of the prison, and flies back to the place in like 30 minutes. There's something going on with time there. There's some plot holes in that, pretty major plot holes.
Fair enough. And then my last stock up is being hung like a horse. So Billy's...
All right, we might have to bring clips back after this one.
Billy's somewhat pathetic overall, but like his German captors, he's got an absolute howitzer. So...
Did I miss this in the book?
Yeah, you did miss it in the book. I don't know how you missed it.
I'm not great at reading until usually it comes to howitzer size, and I usually hone in, but I don't know what happened there. I missed it somehow.
Yeah, so, when you have a situation like that, when you got the old tripod...
Yeah, you know from experience, but go on.
Yeah, the giant's arm holding an apple. It must be nice, because then, the rest of it is kind of like, oh, whatever. So it goes, what else can you say? But I read this on my Kindle, which I pull out here and there. We both read this analog style as opposed to our digital age. I mean, granted, I read it on a Kindle, but you know what I'm saying? We didn't listen to it. But Kindles are fun, man. They let you like highlight stuff, and it'd be good for both of us because our dictionary understandings are minimal, and you just touch a word and it tells you what it means. So you would have been able to figure out the difference between impotent and impudent. So
I told you can't make fun of someone for not knowing how to pronounce a word because they found it out by reading.
Oh.
So I read that, looked it up, and then I just didn't know how to pronounce it. So I'm getting myself a pass. and a pat in the back.
Yeah, both. All right, what do you got for Stuck Down?
I only had one, and it's just being a character in this book, Stuck Down. I mean, it's tough to be a semi-autobiographical novel and then being like, oh, I knew that guy in the war, and then picking up this book and being any character in this book.
Yeah.
Because literally, if you just go through the list of characters that we get introduced to, every single person has some issue. Even Billy, who's the main guy, he still makes him a piece of shit. He's like, my wife's ugly, I'm cheating on her, I don't care about my kids at all.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because it's semi-autobiographical in that a lot of him is in Billy, too, in the sense that he was there during those Dresden bombings, and I'm sure they didn't have PTSD. I mean, people had PTSD for sure, but it wasn't understood as PTSD at the time. And I wonder if like those feelings was, maybe somewhat cathartic or why it took him so long to write the book. But then if you're his wife and she, she's reading an early script, she's like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah. Or his kids, especially like at the end, he's talking about his son who he like didn't know that well. It's like he's 17. He's like, yeah, I didn't really know him that well. It's like, your kid's like, Dad, do you not love me?
Pretty tough. And then, I mean, I can go through the list of characters, but every single other character that's introduced to this book is either a little bit off their rocker or sadistic or arrogant, or there's something wrong with every single character, essentially.
Yeah, except for maybe the guy that introduced him to like the Kilgore trout. The guy was just like obsessed with it. And I actually loved his shtick of just fake it till you make it kind of vibe, or like just pretending to be a normal human being.
Well, they did kind of shit on him. Do you remember that? He said, like, he's like, this Kilgore Trout guy is like amazing stories, but he's a terrible writer. He's so awful. And then Kilgore Trout's like, yeah, I did get a letter from someone.
Oh,
and
right.
I thought it was a kindergartner or something. Yeah. He just shits all over it.
That's
Which
true.
I thought was pretty funny, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I knew that guy. He's like, oh, I thought it was a child. My most obvious Stuck Down, and come on, you only had one. It's war, right? Stuck Down war, the old send the young to die. We're talking about a children's crusade here.
I mean, kid, that's like selling Enron. Like, come on. What are we doing here? Come on. Hey, guys, I just want to let everyone know we don't want to buy this one. Come on.
Yeah, fair enough. This guy invited me to an island. His name's Jeffrey Epstein. He said it's going to be a great time. I think he's kind of a dick. I'm just going to go out there and say it. I don't trust him.
There you go. The company he keeps, I'm good with that. But yeah, other than...
But what's funny is that this book was on Jeopardy. I was watching Jeopardy the other night, and... I don't remember the category, but the answer was Slaughterhouse-Five, and no one knew it. I think it was like Kurt Vonnegut death or whatever. It was like, oh, Slaughterhouse-Five, and I was like yelling it at the screen. No one knew it. I love that part of Jeopardy when I feel like I'm smarter than everybody else.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's great.
Yeah, it's usually only sports questions, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. For me, it's like random stuff, and then they start talking about monarchies or like presidents, and I'm like, I am out. Or geography. No, thank you. My other Stuck Down is time travel. I'm going to have to stock down it because when we think about time travel, at least when I do, I'm thinking about going to the future to see new technology or going to the past to steal Confederate gold by using our advanced weaponry as they did in the underrated Van Damme movie Time Cop. But going back in time to relive terrible war memories sounds like it's not the best use of time travel.
Yeah, it's a hard pass for me on that. Yeah, I agree.
I kind of took it as... the time travel is a way that he shows PTSD because I'm also, the book I have on my nightstand that I've just been like periodically picking up and reading when I can't fall asleep at night is a Sebastian Junger book called War, where he like follows a bunch of people around the Korangal Valley during the, Iraq-Afghanistan war. They eventually made it into a documentary called Restrepo, which is really good. But I was reading it the other night and he's talking about, he was in Paris a year later, whatever the case, after being out of the Korangal, and he sees a couple of guys carrying a mattress in Paris. And he said he was just like immediately got like super sweaty, was like heart racing, and like was like transported back to Afghanistan because that was like the way they were carrying it was like very similar to the way they carry body bags.
Oh, yikes. Yeah.
Maybe it's because I'm reading those two things at the same time, but I thought 1 minute you're living your normal life and then the next minute you're like transported back to these terrible memories. It sounded a lot like PTSD to me, but I don't know. Maybe that was just me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I assume there's some greater underlying theme that I just wasn't able to decipher, but that makes the most sense to me right there.
My last one is barbershop quartets. When I think about barbershop quartet, I'm thinking like, Mr. Salmon, bring me a dream, boop, 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 make her the sweetest one I've ever seen. Something along those lines.
Yeah, pretty solid.
But he has his optometrist or whatever barbershop quartet come in, and they're singing some somber songs for his anniversary party, whatever the case was. Did you read the lyrics to those songs?
No, enlighten me.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to read them because I don't have them saved. They were pretty dour, or as they say in The Blade Itself, which is our next book, doer. It just seems like if you're invited to a party and people invite you to sing, like, don't sing Amy Winehouse's like most depressing song, pretty much.
Well, I think that's kind of true of everything. You know, like Born in the USA is an anti-America or U.S. or war
anti-war
song. Yeah. Everyone like loves that as like a 4th of July song. My favorite
that is kind of
wedding song is Your Love by The Outfield. And that's just kind of like, that's just like, I'm going to use your love tonight. I think that's just like being like, I'm just going to bang you and that's it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what it is. I don't really know the lyrics to that song, but I just love it. So
yeah, we have
it's a great wedding song. So I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I think the lyrics, you don't worry about that.
Okay. Yeah, it just seemed like the vibe, especially after the host is like having a panic attack. Like, don't go for the next one. That's also the same vibe. But yeah, we actually have a big fight, not a big fight, but a disagreement in my house when it comes to lyrics versus just like music. Because I just listen to music and I'm like, oh, I sing along with it, whatever. But I never pay attention to the words. And Caroline's the opposite. So she's all about like, oh, what does this song mean? I'm like, I have literally no idea. Did you have a favorite scene in this one? Not really scene book.
I will say my favorite, probably my laugh out loud moment was...
There was a few.
They're eating a ton of food at the POW camp, and then they're all getting sick because they haven't eaten forever. Mm-hmm. And they're all shitting, and then the guy's like, oh my God, I'm shitting my brains out. And he goes, oh, there it goes. There's the brain. And he goes, I can't imagine someone said that. And he said, I said that. That was me that happened to. I laughed a lot. That's hilarious to me. What about you? You said there's a bunch of other funny ones. What else?
No, I just thought there was there's a lot of comedy in this. And I'm going to get into it later, so I don't really want to talk about it right now. But in terms of favorite scene, I thought like the intro to the Trafalgar Morians or whatever was kind of fun, just because we kind of been hearing about it and whatnot, but we hadn't seen them. And then he's like talking about actually getting abducted and like what life was like up there. It was just kind of wild and totally took me out of the story that was happening, but in a good way, not in a bad way. It was almost like a totally different and super weird story. And he's like has this domestic life that he's living up there in the zoo. I thought it was super weird. And I was kind of wondering, did you know what the point was of the aliens?
No. When I first started reading that, I was like, wait, is this a different book? Like, what just happened here? Like, it just kind of came out of nowhere, and it makes it super original because I did not see a sci-fi element all of a sudden coming into play. And like you mentioned, like interstellar type vibes all of a sudden. I was like, wait, what? What's happening here?
The only thing I could kind of think of was that it's, if you were to show war or something like that to someone that wasn't an Earthling, how would they view it? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That was the only way, because when you're talking about stuff, you're like, oh, what would someone think about, or what would a different being think about this or that? Because it's something that we always come with a perspective of being human and all the history that entails. So if someone just came in from outer space and saw us just brutally murdering each other and whatnot, like how would they look at it? The death stuff was kind of interesting too, in terms of them saying like, oh, that person doesn't die, which it made me feel a little better, especially now in this age where our voices are now being recorded and there's photos and whatnot. Like, you can always think back on those times, or even your great grandkids can see you then, and so you are still like somewhat alive even after you're dead. All right, we'll jump into some love-hate. Keith, what'd you love about Slaughterhouse-Five?
Kind of had some City of Thieves vibes from this at times because of the humor and like it's like everything around you's crumbling and things are terrible, but you're like still making jokes about it kind of vibes, which I thought was good. I can't really tell this story, or it'd be unreadable if it was just like, so then, me and these other three guys who are 18 years old who have never been outside of Iowa decided to like go over here and we're getting shot and beaten and starving. It's like, holy shit, you can't just read that straight up. If you add some humor to it, it kind of gets the message across a little better in my mind.
Yeah, I think that's so well said, honestly, because anti-war novels tend to be, or at least from what I've read, and I know there are other ones like Catch-22 that supposedly is like kind of funny, but I from my understanding, War and Peace is not. And it was a new idea in the sense that an anti-war novel can be both funny and serious. To me, it was kind of like the idea of laughing so we don't cry. You have to find the little pieces of funny so that you don't just like break down and become a big ball of mush. And war and death are such inevitable tragedies that we have to laugh. So we don't cry. And I mean, you were talking about that scene earlier when they're pooping, and they say that he has the diarrhea and he shits quote unquote thin gruel. And then the author equates to him coughing, which is what makes him continue to shit, to Newton's third law of motion, which is equal and opposite reaction, or whatever the case is.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And it was just like, what? It like came out of nowhere, and it was funny. And there was a bunch of that kind of stuff throughout.
Okay, if there's any shit jokes, we'll laugh at them.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah, we have pretty highbrow humor.
So yeah, I thought the comedy throughout was something I loved a lot, and it made it really enjoyable. What else you got?
Kind of mentioned this already, but it's super original. It's pretty out there. I mean, I feel like I've never read a book like this, which, it's always cool. And if this were 20 hours of rambling in this, I'd be like, all right. But this was like a quick read. It seemed to go by really quickly. And I did appreciate a lot of the callbacks. There's a lot of like references that in the first chapter even that he called back into the book. Mm-hmm. It's like a warm blanket where you're like, oh yeah, I remember him saying that earlier.
Yeah, and I also liked how it's mentioned in the foreword, but the guy who wrote the foreword, he calls Slaughterhouse-Five wisdom literature. And I like that because it's a story, but it is full of wisdom, but it doesn't necessarily like beat it over your head like war is bad. Like, yeah, it does mention that, but in a way that makes you like somewhat kind of come to that conclusion just on your own by everything that's happening. And it kind of was reminding me of The Alchemist in that way, but then like less abstract with like parables and stuff. Yeah. It is a book that I'm sure you could dig into this super deep and take tons and tons of literary important things out of it. But if you just read it as a layman like you or me, like I understand what he was trying to say. I think, I think I got the general idea. And war is super shitty. It's fucked up that all these innocent people have to die, and old people send young people to their deaths so that they can be happy. Anything else?
Just the alien stuff. You already mentioned it.
I had that too. And then I also dug just, and like we've kind of been talking about, but like the prose of it all, like the way he wrote it, because it was funny and it was somewhat maybe cynical. I don't know if that's maybe the right word for it, but beginning of it, I highlighted this thing, which was, I'm going to read it here. The Germans and the dog were engaged in a military operation which had an amusingly self-explanatory name, a human enterprise which is seldom described in detail, whose name alone, when reported as news or history, gives many war enthusiasts a sort of post-coital satisfaction. It is, in the imagination of combat's fans, the divinely litless love play that follows the orgasm of victory. It is called mopping up. It's like, how can someone write that paragraph about, going in there and mop it up? It's only like 3 sentences or 2 sentences, but it just puts everything perfectly. When you see that, you're like, oh yeah, you're going in there after killing this German town and you're shooting wounded Germans and killing horses and stuff like that just to shut them up. It's like, you do get a kind of hard on for that, but at the same time, it's like pretty fucked up. So I just loved it. What about Hate?
Kind of already talked about, but it's kind of a classic school book in the sense that it's kind of goes over my head and I take things too literal. I'm sure there's a lot of themes. I'm sure there's PTSD talk. I'm sure there's stuff that you can, like you mentioned, you could break down for days. But it was 5 hours long, so it goes. And like after I got done, I was like, I don't really remember a lot of the book, which is good and bad. I mean, it makes it so it's easy to read, but it also is like you're supposed to probably digest it differently. But that's why I probably sucked at English class.
100% agree. I mean, I feel like I'm a almost 37-year-old man, and this was probably definitely too smart for me. Like, there's a lot of smart stuff in here that someone really smart would come.
It's a high school book.
Yeah, I know. And like someone really smart. There's probably a high school kid that we could break this down and I'd be like, oh wow, I never thought about it like that. But it's the same way with me with like movies and whatnot. I like to go and read Ebert's review, or whoever now writes the Ebert reviews after I watch a movie, and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't see any of that. I was watching a different movie. Like, I was just thought it was fun stuff. Did you have any lingering questions
This is more just generic, but I don't really understand how you write a book like this.
No, I have no idea.
Like, when do you decide to do the jumps? Where are you getting the aliens from? I would think we already kind of over this, but how are you editing? If someone reads this editing, I don't know where anything should go. I don't know. It wasn't really there's no answer to that, I don't think.
There's not, and all this stuff blows me away. Like, even I was watching the Oscars the other night, and how people edit these movies and the sound design and stuff like that, and people are explaining, like, oh, like, he said he wanted a violin, so I created this whole score. I'm like, what? I'm so fucking dumb. I can't do any of that stuff. So, yeah, I don't know how these people's brains work. I'm just glad that we share some DNA. Yeah, that's all that matters.
You've been shooting your DNA across to Hollywood? Is that what you're saying?
What did he say in the book? He said, like, he squeezed his seminal vesicles into his wife Valencia or something like that. Oh, God, it was so good. I love that stuff.
Erotic.
Speaking about erotic, I got some listener mail.
You've got mail.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we have Katharina from the Czech Republic. She says, hello, perhaps my message is too specific, but my older sister found a wonderful man here and they have a great relationship. But what about me? I am 25 years old, Katharina from Czech Republic, no English language also. And better to say it immediately, I am bisexual. I am not jealous of another woman, especially if we make love together. I'm not sure this is, yes, I cook very tasty, and I love not only cook, winky face. I'm real girl. Okay, so I don't think this was actually what we were expecting.
Was that the one about Shogun, or what was that about?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Interesting commentary on Shogun.
Initially, I was thinking Shogun, but now I'm thinking it's junk mail. But there's a link here. I could click on it. That was a legit email that we did receive. If you are listening and would like to send us an actual email that's not like that, we would appreciate it. Has there been any movie adaptations of this?
There is one, and I watched the trailer, and it is just as weird as the book. The trailer is from the 70s. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. I would have casted, I don't know if you casted anyone.
No, I want to hear it, though.
I only casted two people, Billy, Robert Pattinson. I think like he can play the loopy kind of crazy dude.
Yeah.
And then you knew the answer for this one, Kilgore Trout, Johnny Depp. I already told you, I think the writer is similar to who Johnny Depp's played a bunch of times. The journalist that's like crazy.
Oh, Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter S. Thompson. So I think his writing style is similar, so I just was picturing Kilgore Trout being that same person.
Yeah.
So
I like it. I can dig. I mean, Johnny Depp would do a great job, of course. Keith, would you recommend Slaughterhouse-Five to our listeners who maybe have not read it?
I liked it. I wouldn't go on my way to recommend it. I think certain people would like it. Again, I liked it, but would you recommend it to someone? I can't think of anyone I'd recommend it to.
Yeah, it's not a beach read, you know what I mean? Which is usually what I
read by the pool, so it went by really quickly. I liked it.
Okay, yeah.
I think it would be kind of weird if you're like, no, you'll like this book, and someone reads it, it's like, what the fuck? You know? If someone said it to me, I'd get it. So I guess to me, I'd recommend it to myself. Yeah. All right, we're back.
If you had a buddy that was in the army and he was like pretty diehard, he was like, hey, read this book. I would not recommend it, but let's just say I had at this age, I don't know, niece or nephew or someone that I knew that was in high school, and I was like, oh, what's your summer reading or whatever the case is, and they said Slaughterhouse-Five, I would say, hey, could get a lot worse, trust me, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I liked it as well. I don't think I would revisit it, but I think there's definitely a place for it, and I think anyone that reads it would enjoy it to some degree. That's what I think. It's not going to make my top 10.
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking about top 10s, what do you got coming up next?
The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie coming up next. It's a little longer one, but back to the epics, if you will. And then we're going to be throwing in The Three Body Problem by Lou Cixin. I don't know. Cixin. I can barely read as it is. So anyways.
Have you started Blade Itself yet?
I'm like halfway.
I think my wheelhouse outside of like good sci-fi is sword and sorcery. I just dig it. I dig all that stuff. It makes me happy. Yeah, I'm excited to chat about that one. So nice. We'll be getting that around next week. And that was Slaughterhouse-Five. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you want to come down and check out Kurt Vonnegut's house, which I think is like a thing you can walk through, swing on by. Say hello. Knock on my front door. I'll call the cops.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
Bye now.
Bye now.